How's it going, everyone, and welcome to the Ultimate Gaming Realm. This is your host and creator, Jason Dixon, logging on. And that's my Tiffany spirit in the background following me. Yeah, my Tiffany doll would definitely be hurt if I left her out of this case. She wants to have some fun, too. Previously, I did almost an hour special on the stories and review of the first survival horror game that pioneered the 3D third-person survival horror genre, Alone in the Dark. Which Alone in the Dark game was an innovative masterpiece of 3D gaming in 1992. And which led them into making a second entry, Alone in the Dark 2. Oh yes, we're in for another one. Alone in the Dark 2 was first released by the end of 1993 on MS-DOS and later ported to other home computers and home consoles, which I will explain about the home console ports as well as my memories with Alone in the Dark near the end of this project this time. Alone in the Dark 2 takes place 3 months after the events of the first game around Christmas time in 1924. Alone in the Dark 2 doesn't focus much on Lovecraftian monsters like they did in the previous entry, but still dealings with ghosts, spirits, and monsters, just a different kind this time. Let's look at the cover art for Alone in the Dark 2. Judging from the cover for Alone in the Dark 2, I don't know what to make of it. It looks like a pirate ship going through a stormy wave and a ghost pirate looking down from the sky at someone on the sidewalk carrying a lantern. I'm assuming that the guy carrying the lantern is Carnby. Now, when comparing the sequel cover to the cover of the first game, it doesn't look much of a comparison. But then again, I'm pretty sure it might be into some kind of different surprise for this dark journey. Well, judging from the cover, it's possible, besides our mission case, that we're going to be going on another booty hunt. Or treasure hunt, to be exact. Well, actually, it's booty hunt. Where I've already found a good piece of booty already. Actually, this case has nothing to do with treasure hunting or anything. This is something different. However, my Tiffany spirit will still be involved. And besides, I think I got all the booty I need anyhow. Yeah. What's the plot for Alone in the Dark 2? Well, just like the first game, Alone in the Dark 2 came with a Mystery Examiner newspaper article. Let's examine the Examiner to help us determine what we're in for. The Mystery Examiner, dated Thursday, December 22nd of 1924, about 3 months from the previous case from Jarret in Louisiana. Of course, I already said it was a 3-month gap already. And this Mystery Examiner is an Xmas issue, also known as a Christmas issue. And the main article here is about a California kidnapping, which got the police confused. Oh, I bet you. But before we read into the main article, let's check out the other panels first. Like here's one on Jarret, which the description of the events that happened is quite inaccurate. Like it didn't happen 3 years ago, it happened 3 months ago. And the tragedy happened in Louisiana, not Florida. And that article is written by this supposed on-the-spot news hound, Harry Magruder. Well, Mr. Magruder, interesting piece of fiction here, but you got the facts all mixed up. And you certainly are not on the spot when it comes to reporting, Mr. Magruder. I can see why nobody believes in scandal sheets. Okay, what other articles and ads? These classic articles and ads are interesting reads regardless if they're fiction or non-fiction. The last article, or should I say the last ad, is most likely my favorite. Blow big holes into criminals. They should make these legal all across the nation in real life, in the rightful hands. Alright already. Let's get to the main article. Let's get down to business. The California kidnapping. An unspeakable act by William J. Herbert, the chief editor. A whole page that continues on to page 2. Oh, at least it's not Mr. Magruder writing this article. Alright. The kidnapped victim was an 8-year-old girl that goes by the name of Grace Saunders. Now that name itself rings the bell. However, Grace's father, George, implores a phone call from the kidnappers for a ransom exchange. A case of unmarked bills of 20s for his daughter's freedom. Assuming that's what the kidnappers wanted. After all, George Saunders is a wealthy man. But unfortunately, a phone call from the kidnappers never happened. In that case, why did the kidnappers grab his daughter? What could they possibly want from Grace? Especially around Christmas time. Obviously, it didn't seem like they want anything from George. This does sound like a confusing case. An 8-year-old girl being kidnapped around Christmas time. An 8-year-old girl of a wealthy man. And no ransom call, even though Mr. Saunders has the money ready just in case. Unfortunately, no call never came through. What can go worse than that? However, his daughter, Grace Saunders, must be found. An 8-year-old girl kidnapped around Christmas time and no phone call being called about a ransom. The police were obviously baffled, so George decided to hire a private investigator for this case. A senior private investigator by the name of Ted Stryker, who happens to be a mentor, friend, and partner of Edward Carnby. Stryker did find some clues to the whereabouts of the missing girl that was located in a mansion called Hell's Kitchen, not to get confused with the city in New York, but a mansion in California. Hell's Kitchen, that's a mansion that's run by bootleggers and the mastermind that goes by the name of One-Eyed Jack. However, Stryker also discovered that the mansion is cursed. And before Stryker can investigate any further, he decided to send a telegram to his friend and partner, Edward Carnby, who was actually given the nickname the Supernatural Private Eye, since with his experience from the Derceto case. Stryker may think this case is more up Carnby's alley, and I think he's right for that one. So on the 22nd, after sending the telegram, he decided to investigate further into the Hell's Kitchen to try and rescue the girl. but something happened to him.
22nd of December, 1924.
Yeah, the voiceovers in this game is well done. As you can see, that striker climbing over the hedge by the guardhouse with holding a pistol at 38, I'm assuming. Doing very good by far of going in undetected. Yeah, pretty much moves fast for an older chubby guy, I'll tell you that. And he's much more, he also has agility for climbing as well as stealth. Yeah, he's definitely well balanced. Unbelievable. That's something Carnby couldn't do. And he's even thinner and younger. Stryker feels more like cross between Lara Croft and Agent 47. Made it through inside the house. Obviously, Stryker taking a napkin and wiping all the sweat off of it, which definitely was a lot of work. And he sees Grace on the bed. Obviously, the sorceress noticed something suspicious and waking up this magical being, which is known as the clown. Then the next, Stryker did find Grace alright. Unfortunately, that turned out to be the last thing he found. Oh shit.
Two days later.
2 days later, on Christmas Eve, Carnby arrived at Hell's Kitchen by taxi. Then he went to the front gate and put down a bag which has a bomb in it and blow up the front gate so he can enter the property. Carnby is armed with a .38 revolver. That's where the gameplay starts. Now it's time to kick ass and rescue the girl. Get organized here before we start. The gameplay starts at the entrance by the guardhouse. You also notice the gatekeeper was knocked down from that explosion, but slowly gains conscious and gets back up. And you must fight him to death with your fist or feet or head, whatever, or use your .38 and waste him. Just make sure you're not fighting him going towards the entrance where he came from. I'll explain why you don't want to go back through that way in a minute. After you defeat the gatekeeper, get his Thompson gun, which you definitely will need, the drum clip for the Thompson gun, and the flask. Yeah, you definitely need the flask to refill health. You don't want to leave the property the way you came in, because death awaits you. After all, you got a job to do. The gameplay mechanics for Alone in the Dark 2 is most likely the same as the predecessor, with some slight improvements with character movement. But not too much of an improvement, definitely. Carnby can still punch from left to right, and Carnby can now do a headbutt as well as a karate kick, instead of doing a groin kick. When it comes to hand-to-hand combat, or melee combat, you want to focus on the enemy and never give them time to recover, especially if they're armed. In other words, if you're attacking an enemy like that, stay on his ass. till he's dead. No mercy. Like the first game, you definitely want to save more frequently in this one. In fact, more than before. Because it's harder than the first game. Especially when you're dealing with spirits that are armed with guns this time. The first game only has 2 guns, a revolver and a pump-action shotgun, and they were useful. But in Alone in the Dark 2, the aiming is more outdated than the first game, and the camera angles are not on par with defense mechanics. Like any handgun like the 38 that you have from the beginning that has only 6 rounds and it's quite useless. Well, don't get me wrong, it's better than nothing, but believe me, any pistol in this game is useless. There's also Riot Gun, which is actually a weak version of the shotgun that only holds 1 shell, and it doesn't do much good. So the best gun to use for Alone in the Dark 2 is the Thompson gun, and the best melee weapon to use is either a frying pan or a pirate sword. As you can tell, Alone in the Dark 2 does not have a character selection like the first game did, so Emily Hartwood has no part of the sequel, or should I say this case. Well, fair enough, because Edward Carnby is a PI by profession, and Hell's Kitchen case has no connection to DeSoto. In fact, Hell's Kitchen case didn't have anything to do with Carnby at first, until he received a telegram from his partner, Stryker. And since Carnby had experiences with ghosts and evil spirits, Carnby was called in for that matter. However, through this mystery, there will be time later on in the game where you'll have to control Grace. We'll get to that when the time comes. Let's examine Carnby a little careful. He doesn't have a mustache like he did in the first game, and in the previous game he was wearing a green suit, but in this one he was wearing more of a heavier blue suit. Well, after all, it's December, of course. When you start the game at the gate, and after dealing with the gatekeeper zombie, and then you walk up ahead, you see other gangster zombies. And of course, you want to save the game before dealing with them. You always want to save the game before dealing with what's ahead. And here's a prime example why. So unless if you got experience with this game, especially around the shooting mechanics, you definitely want to save frequently as possible, because without knowing what you're doing, since it doesn't have an auto aim, you're gonna get your ass turned into Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese ass. Also, if Carnby dies during the first half of the game, depending on what the outcome of Carnby's death is, one of the gangster ghouls carries Carnby's corpse through the bootleg room and drops Carnby's corpse off the cliff into the sea. And when you're dealing with those zombies in front of the house, you want to go back near the front entrance, just don't go out the front gate, to deal with them so that way you have a better aim. And not to forget to use your Thompson gun that you got out the gatekeeper. Like I said before, aiming is a bitch, and so are the camera angles. And you must be at the right angle to see what the hell you're doing when using a gun. That's why I save the game before dealing with them. And there will be 2 coming your way. And there's also 2 more guarding the front door, which you don't have to deal with since you can't get through the front door anyway. But you can deal with them if you want to. Just don't forget to save the game before dealing with them. I'm not sure what to refer to these creatures that carries guns or melee weapons, either as gangster zombies or gangster ghosts or gangster ghouls or gangster spirits. Well, call them what you will, but they will vanish in orbs after dealing with them, just like dealing with the creatures from the first game. One of the first things to go through in this game is the Green Hedge maze, which is actually pretty cool to go through as well as to look at. However, still, beware of gangster ghouls. And just like the first game, I keep saying that, I know, but I also have memories with this one, but unlike the first game, I'm going to say it near the end, though. Now, the maze itself is well detailed. The mazes is practically the only thing that hasn't been dated as of today for this game by far. Now, the music score itself for Alone in the Dark 2, I say it's still pretty good and worth listening to on special occasions, but the soundtrack for Alone in the Dark 2 doesn't have the dark, spooky, atmospheric themes like the soundtrack for the first game did. In fact, Alone in the Dark 2 game itself doesn't have the proper survival horror concept like the first Alone in the Dark game. I will explain more about that at the end. After you're done with the maze, or think you got everything around the maze, you will eventually get into the mansion through the secret ladder entrance to the underground. However, you will lose all your weapons by accidentally drop them off the cliff, but it's not the end of the world. You can always get more. And worst of all, this is where Carnby finds the lifeless body of his friend and partner, Ted Stryker, as well as the other half of the page of his final word. Carnby already found the previous page through the card hatch tunnel that was hidden in the maze. And here's Stryker's final words.
Carnby, if you read this, it means I am dead. The Saunders child was kidnapped by One-Eyed Jack, despite what the newspaper claimed. That man is a monster, obsessed with gambling and death. Hell's Kitchen is full of secret passages. I am sure that for one of them, the solution is in the cards. Remember our poker games. I can also tell you that the gang makes whiskey in the cellar and transports it by boat at high tide from a cave.
I think the DOS box might have some technical audio issues here with this game. Carnby, you must rid the world of that filth and save the girl, if you can. It's time for the slave to become stronger than the master. I, Jason Dixon, along with my guardian angel, will be looking over Carnby to make sure he gets the task done. Rescue the girl and escape, as well as getting justice for Ted Stryker. One-Eyed Jack and Elizabeth Jarret must pay. Now entering the wine cellar. Oh, and by the way, there will be times you'll have to come across contraptions which you'll have to get right the first time, like with this one. Doesn't this place look familiar? The same place where your body gets disposed is over that cliff through that caveway there. Well, anyway, since you're here, the next thing you want to do is create a contraption, unless if you want to deal with them the old-fashioned way, like you did with the others ahead of you, or after that. Well, contraption's the best way to see how things go. BAM! Serves you right, motherfucker. What a fall. What a fall indeed. Well, this riot gun here, as well as a flask, this riot gun here is quite useless. I mean, it only holds one shell, and of course I already told you how the aiming is in the game. Well, anyway, I'm going to skip forward a little bit more. Then when you return to the shooting range, you will see a half-naked drunk gangster who's supposed to dress up as Santa Claus. Now this one is obviously easy to deal with, and that Santa Claus costume comes in handy. After dealing with the drunk, next thing to do is take the Santa costume bag. Next, head upstairs, and you're on the first floor of Hell's Kitchen, in the lobby. But right after you come up the stairs, or should I say probably before you go up the stairs, you might want to put on the Santa costume as disguise, because you will see one of the small cooks coming back and forth from the kitchen to upstairs. And it's best to wear a Santa Claus costume as well as avoiding doing anything to alert his suspicions. Otherwise, the mini cook will blow the whistle and the mobster gangsters will come out of a different room, and you don't want that to happen unless you got the balls to fight them both off. And that's also the room you want to avoid as of now, because it's full of living gangsters, and you don't want to get in front of them, no matter if you're in disguise or not. Next thing you want to do while in disguise is go through the hallway and avoid getting near or running in front of a trident statue which is possessed. And if it spots you, then it wakes up and the spear will chase after you. Now here's one part I have to admit. This is definitely one of the scariest parts in Alone Dark 2. The spear will chase after you and it won't stop until it gets you. And that's one of the biggest moments in history as well. Then enter the kitchen, where you'll find a frying pan, which is definitely useful as a weapon, and a plate of bacon and eggs, which also replenishes your health. You will also find T-Bone, who happens to be the head cook of the cookies. That's what these little cooks are called, cookies. When you're in disguise, he'll give you a tip that anybody in the private rooms will open the door for a bottle of wine. But for some odd reason, T-Bone gets suspicious and starts using his blowgun on you, which these darts can be blocked, having the frying pan equipped. You just have to hold the frying pan in the proper position. The best way to deal with T-Bone is either using a frying pan or hand to hand. You can't use a gun, because that might blow your disguise if anyone hears a gunshot. And it's also best to avoid dealing with him around the little cook. It's best to deal with T-Bone right after the little cook exits from the kitchen. Also, it looks like T-Bone has its limits with the darts, so he pulls out a frying pan of his own and tries to use it. Then after dealing with T-Bone, you must get the poison and get the wine and combine them both. You want to know something that's really funny and it would be stupid to do in real life, which I did something stupid in the game just to see how it is. Of course I say the game before this, is that I have Carnby drink the poisonous wine. And of course it kills him. Stupid move indeed, but funny. Obviously, the poison was meant for the next room, to the kitchen. Just put the poison wine on the floor in front of the door and one of the gangsters or someone grabs it, then drinks the wine and dies. Now you have access to the room, which has a hidden room, which has a bulletproof vest, which definitely comes in handy, as well as another Thompson gun. So now you have the Thompson gun again, which is even better. Now before I head upstairs onto the second floor, I must get that crown off the trident. And there is a way of dealing with that magic bean. And that is to use the mini cook that walks back and forth as a shield. And if you succeeded, then you don't have to worry about either of those two anymore. As well as not needing the Santa Claus costume anymore. Though you can still wear it if you want to while it's still in your possession, but it wouldn't be any use any further as a disguise. After you get the crown off the trident and get everything done on the first floor, with the exception of the living room as of now, then it's time to go upstairs. When you get upstairs, you first have to deal with another one of Jack's crew members. This crew member has dual pistols, and this crew member is known as the Black Hat. Once you're done with the Black Hat, enter the second floor corridor, to see which room to investigate next. I see Carnby warped into the attic. Wait a fucking minute. It's that fucking clown again. This is the bedroom where Stryker found Gracie. And Stryker was attacked by the clown, whom the clown was actually a magical being controlled by a sorceress, Elizabeth Jarret. She was mainly responsible for the death of Carnby's partner. Bitch. But when you're facing the clown or dealing with him, for some odd reason, it's now harmless. Maybe the sorceress was either out to lunch or occupied with a different spell. Or maybe she's just watching and waiting for something to come up. You just have to throw a pom-pom that you found into the snake room to get rid of the clown. And of course distract the snakes. Wait for them to get out of your pathway so you can go enter through there and go to the fireplace and throw a grenade down the fireplace, and the other end of the fireplace goes into the living room downstairs. After that, then enter the fireplace, and you're now in the living room. Now you took out half of the crew that's in that room. There is still another challenge to come once you come out of the fireplace. Make sure you're prepared and escape into another room and wait for one gangster at a time to get caught in the doorway so you can waste each one of them with your Thompson gun. Or your fist and feet if you have them in the correct position. After dealing with them, Go to the Christmas tree that has the biller ball as an ornament. Grab the biller ball and go back upstairs to the biller room. Then put the biller ball where it's supposed to go. And then a bookcase slides over, revealing the hidden door. Which is a hidden lock door, that is. Which I already have a key to unlock. After I unlock the door, open the door, look where it leads Carnby next. To a holding cell that's in One-Eyed Jack's bedroom, which obviously had set up for a trap for Carnby. And Jack knows who Carnby is, obviously. Then Jack explains his story to Carnby.
By the horn of Beelzebub, the Flying Dutchman was calling me. It was like honey to a bee. The enemy wanted to put an end to it. Its cannons spouted death. No matter. My ship was sinking, but my praise bridge flowed with blood. On this Xmas Eve of 1724, the cries of pain filled the air like the most glorious of hymns. The captain, one Nichols, told me to go to the devil. He died cursing me. You will die by my sword, Jack! Ha ha! His sword remained stuck on the deck of his ship, the Flying Dutchman. My lieutenants greedily burst the locks of the hold. The crew seemed disappointed with the loot, but I knew we had taken the finest of all treasures. And in Elizabeth's eyes, I could read our destiny, and death became an illusion. I signed the pact, and so did my men. The Dutchman was ours. From then on, thousands of legends were being told about the Flying Dutchman. We hid here in 1824. But the cliff collapsed on our ship. And so our land flowed with blood, and we named our conquest Hell's Kitchen. A land with no past offered itself to us to guarantee our future. We built our mansion, and since then, we reign undisputedly. Ha 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 ha!
Now these cutscenes, the animated still images and voiceovers are pretty interesting to say at least. And I learned something from One-Eyed Jack when I was in the holding cell. So One-Eyed Jack and his crew, along with Elizabeth Jarret, the whole saga begins 200 years ago. and technically currently on or above the Flying Dutchman. Of course, I'm starting to understand that reading the books that I found by far, and hearing a side of the story from One-Eyed Jack, I'll be also interested in hearing Elizabeth Jarret's side of the story. Now, after the cutscene, Jack says this in text, saying that he is going to bring Carnby to the ship, and also says that Carnby is going to meet the same fate as Grace. But at that moment, during our conversation, and while Jack is distracted, Grace manages to slip out. Jack turns around and walks out, leaving Carnby to decide on how he's going to escape the holding cell. Which is pretty easy since he's got a hook that he got off the Music Man and manages to escape the cell. Once you escape the cell, look around for Grace, starting in the One-Eyed Jack's room, which you obviously can't find nothing at present. But then you go downstairs into the lobby, and what next? Elizabeth Jarret comes in from the front entrance of the house and puts a spell on Carnby to temporarily weaken him. Then Carnby has been captured this time and lose all his possessions. It seems that Elizabeth, as a sorceress, is obviously the main strength of One-Eyed Jack and his crew. Of course, she's a sorceress, as well as being responsible for Stryker's death. After Carnby gets captured, this is where Grace becomes a playable character, as she starts out in the front entrance, hiding behind the statue on the right side of the Hedge maze. First thing she sees is Elizabeth and One-Eyed Jack escorting a helpless, tied-up Carnby like a prisoner. Then that's where you control Grace. Obviously, she's not trying to escape, but trying to rescue Carnby. Brave little girl indeed. It's not hard to tell at first glance, especially for an 8-year-old girl, is not likely any shape or form for defense tactics. With the exception of contraptions, and she can be pretty smart too. In a way, kind of reminds me of Kevin McAllister from Home Alone. The best thing that Grace can do is hide or get what she needs in order to advance. She must go along undetected, and if any one of the gangsters catch you, then it's game over. And at this point on, since we're on the second half of the game, if either Grace or Carnby fails, you will be seeing Carnby on the ship hanging upside down with his feet tied to the ropes. Not sure if he's dead or not, or just want to put him up like that just to humiliate him in front of One-Eyed Jack's crew. And anyway, first thing Grace actually does is go into the trunk of the convertible and hide there while one of the gangsters drives the car to the backyard, right near the gazebo. She found a billiard ball in there. It's obviously not a toy, though. She uses it for something. Well, eventually she actually gets caught and gets brought to the cargo where Carnby's tied up at the moment. And then we hear Elizabeth Jarret's side of the story.
More than 2 centuries ago, Elizabeth Jarret arrived in Haiti. I was then an innocent young girl, but Cotton, my tutor, taught me contempt. In hiding, a slave of his taught me to ride the shadows. Soon, The slave grew stronger than the master. Cotton felt the extent of my revenge and became my creature. The soldiers took us prisoner, but could they recognize Cotton? From then on, the Flying Dutchman was my jail. I could see the desk where the captain hid the duplicate to the iron's key. My spirit wandered. One-Eyed Jack heard my call for help. My soul guided him, and death is my ally. He and his crew would become immortal, and every 100 years, an innocent girl would turn old for us. A gust of freedom freshened my jail.
Oh, that evil witch. So it's all starting to make sense. The motive for kidnapping Grace is quite clear now. When you're controlling Grace, it's all about stealth and being undetected, as well as contraptions of your own at the right time. First of all, let's feed the parrot and see what he's got to say.
If it is the staff you're looking for, it has been hidden. What a bore! In the cabin of the One-Eyed Man, that's where you should seek it, if you can. If you please, do not...
Very helpful indeed. Thank you very much. I'm also going to be cutting through the chase with walkthrough on the Grace's behalf because it was pretty much a time factor, and I'm trying to get this done close to under an hour or a little above as quick as I can. Just getting to the main facts of the story for the most part. When you enter the kitchen on the Dutchman, you find a bell that opens a dumbwaiter, and you also find a chicken's foot, which is definitely useful for something later. I'll get to that when the time comes. And once Grace gets to Jack's bedroom, She has a vision, and then she searches the area. She finds the key and a book. After using the captain's staff that you found in Captain Nichols' cabin, now the book she found is obviously vital to her survival as well as Carnby's survival.
I overcame voodoo, an unpublished chapter of manuscript found in a bottle. In the heart of the storm, the Malay suddenly emerged from the cabin, waving a chicken leg. The possessed one would have given his soul for chalk. Captain Pregg's orders rang out about the howling of the tempest. Do as he says. A monstrous wave had taken Giovanno, the cabin boy. Another terrifying wall of water loomed to starboard, demanding its due. The Malay grabbed the chalk as if it were a diamond-studded crown. Upon the deck he drew a strange pattern. Papa Legba, screamed the demented savage, waving his chicken leg. The effect was prodigious. The wave stopped where it was, twixt heaven and hell. He then searched inside the leather pouch that he had hanging round his neck, and took out a piece of mirror. He placed it in the center of the altar that stood beneath the mizzenmast, and on which he had drawn a vive. Drawing from his red belt the strange staff which he always carried, the Malay shook it at the wave and chanted. The giant wave sank gently into the ocean. Voodoo! Voodoo! Yelled our savior as Giovanno's body struck the vessel's hull. I can bring him back. The Malay looked over at Prext, who answered, No, the fool could not even read.
So at least we know how to stop Elizabeth Jarret now. From what I read, and I overcame voodoo. Ezekiel Pregg's name was in the book, the main protagonist from the first game. And that's right, he was also a pirate, as well as a bloodthirsty captain, who was also into occult and black magic. So maybe there might be some kind of a connection with the first case. And Grace has the key. She tries to go back to the cargo area on the boat. Then when you ride through the kitchen on the ship through the dumbwaiter, those cookies spot her and bring her back to the cargo area, where she was going to go anyway. When she got there, one of the pirates trying to detain the little girl, but she puts up a struggle with him in order to create a distraction so she can throw the key to Carnby for him to unchain himself. Then after he chains himself, that kind of caught the guard's attention off, and then Grace escapes, and then Carnby deals with this guy. Carnby must defeat this pirate with his fist and feet, and take his sword. I noticed that every creature in the first Alone in the Dark game, after you waste them, they turn into orbs before disappearing. But in Alone in the Dark 2, some of them turn into orbs and some of them just vanish, and then later in the game when you're facing pirates, their skin dissolves into skeletons, and then their bones dissolve. Or should I say, just that their pirate's flesh just dissolves, since they're spirits after all, or a form of black magic. So now Carnby has the pirate sword, which is totally the most useful melee weapon in the game, or throughout the rest of this adventure. So now you're back to playing Carnby again, and the music goes back to how it was before. Oh, okay. So, from this point on, Carnby is going to be fighting 200-year-old pirates. And when it comes to shooting weapons from this point on, you will find the Thompson again, but you won't find any more ammo. The Thompson has 10 bullets left in it, and it's not a whole lot for the rest of the crew. You don't even need it anyway. There is also the pistol, the pirate pistol, which is actually a pretty cool weapon, but once again, like any other pistol like the 38, it's quite useless since you can't point it in a proper direction. That one can also load up to one bullet, just like the shotgun with one shell, the riot gun. And aiming's pretty bad, so better to use the sword throughout the rest of the journey. Oh yeah, and another thing you'll find on the ship is a coat of mail, which is actually the pirate's version of the bulletproof vest, or armor, which is also useful too. Of course, like bulletproof vests, this coat of mail can expire. When Carnby enters Captain Nichols' room, the sorceress once again traps Carnby with the same spell as she did before. But when Carnby gets trapped in that spell, the next thing, Grace comes into the room and you're controlling her again. She uses the staff to place into the right hand of the statue of Captain Nichols, which reveals another hidden room. And that hidden room is Elizabeth Jarret's hidden cabin, as well as a hidden shrine. Of course, the sorceress was unaware that Grace discovered her weakness. Grace uses the chicken foot to destroy the sorceress once and for all. So that puts the end to Elizabeth Jarret, as well as dissolving the strain for One-Eyed Jack and his crew. Now Carnby is free from the spell again, and you're back to controlling him for the rest of the adventure. 2 final tasks that Carnby must do: kill One-Eyed Jack and escape with Grace. During the sorceress' final moment, she manages to summon one more magical being, which is a giant zombie, which cannot be defeated, but easily avoided. So you definitely want to avoid taking him on. Now when you get on deck, you will fight the remaining crew. Before you face Jack, that is. You must kick all their asses. Then you have to take on Jack's acrobatic right-hand man, who has Captain Nichols' sword, in a sword duel. After you defeat the right-hand man, you must take Captain Nichols' sword, because that's the only sword, or the only weapon that can defeat One-Eyed Jack. And you can take a guess. What's the final duel? Yep, another sword fight. Pretty much like Captain Zico Franks from the first game, except you're fighting One-Eyed Jack this time with Captain Nichols' sword, and he has 2 swords. Plus he has a martial art kick of his own too, from the looks of it. Sword duels here and there. Of course, during the sword duel, you must keep Grace safe and prevent the cannons from going off during the battle. Kick his ass, Carnby. Looks like he did. Oh, no, he just knocked him down and he got back to his feet. Come on! How many hits does this bastard take? Take that one-eyed prick out. Oh, looks like he did. Or did he? Looks like both Grace and Edward are escaping now. Uh-oh, and it looks like One-Eyed Jack, who's half skin alive, is come to aim at them. Watch out! Oh shit. The Flying Dutchman just blew up inside there. Oh, it looks like Carnby and Grace escaped on the small boat. Well, with Elizabeth Jarret gone and One-Eyed Jack gone, the Flying Dutchman and Hell's Kitchen is now gone, leaving Carnby and Grace to escape in victory. And that marks the end of Alone in the Dark 2. Now that was the second entry in the Alone in the Dark series. This game was longer than the first one, but not in the best way. Unexpectedly, this episode is longer than expected, which I'm not sure what way to put it. Now the gameplay, camera angles, controls are like the first game, are dated. Actually, feels more out of place in Alone in the Dark 2 when dealing with assholes with guns this time. The story and music score for Alone in the Dark 2 are still good, but Alone in the Dark 2 feels more like an action-adventure game than it does a survival horror game. And with the plot and music score, feels more like Monkey Island games, or something similar to that concept. But then again, this game involves black magic, that's it. And it's set in centuries later where you actually play as a character to investigate a ghost ship from the past or a mansion that's a front for a ghost ship. So I guess you can add a little survival horror element to that too. And there were some scary moments in that game too. Just not a lot. Alone in the Dark 2 is not what you call a masterpiece when comparing it to the first game. Alone in the Dark 2 did not have Frederick Reno involved. Infogrames had Bruno Bono behind this one. So I guess that explains why the sequel is inferior to its predecessor. Just like the first game, Alone in the Dark 2 did get a 3DO console release. But unlike the first game, the second game got an updated console release 3 years later for the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. Except they didn't call it Alone in the Dark 2. They called it Alone in the Dark One-Eyed Jack's Revenge. Now, just like the first game, I did have some memories with the second game. And it was actually on the PlayStation in late 1996. Near the time when that version came out. It's also been in months after I'd gotten the PlayStation console and Resident Evil. I rented Alone in the Dark One-Eyed Jack's Revenge on the PlayStation. Little I knew at the time, I didn't realize I was playing an updated version of Alone in the Dark 2. However, even back then, the game didn't appeal to me when compared to the first game. Yes, it didn't meet the expectations as the first game did when I played it on the 3DO 2 years prior. And after when I played Resident Evil months earlier, Alone in the Dark series was already dated when it comes to tank controls and gameplay mechanics. But when I revisit Alone in the Dark on the 3DO, well, the first game, it brought my memories back and I actually still had fun with it. I got better experiences years later when I played the PC version of the game. Here's one thing that's really ridiculous. If Alone in the Dark 2 got an updated version, why didn't the first game get the same treatment? And that one was more superior of the two. Not given the same treatment for the first game is fucking bullshit. So, I never looked back on that version. Besides, why did they call it One-Eyed Jack's Revenge? It sounds more like a sequel to Alone in the Dark 2 itself, where Jack comes back to get his revenge. But no, it's the same game. So the only time I played that port was during the time I rented it, and I never revisited it since, and I have no intention on revisiting that one. PlayStation or Saturn version. Well, they're practically the same. I'm not going to even visit the 3DO version. The PC version is the best way to go. Anyway, Alone in the Dark 2 is still a good game. And a good sequel. Just not as good as the first game. Since Grace Saunders been rescued and returned to her family safe and sound, and justice has been served for Ted Stryker, and One-Eyed Jack's crew along with Elizabeth Jarret have been sent into oblivion along with the Flying Dutchman and the cherry that's on top of it, which is the Hell's Kitchen. Edward Carnby went back home and relaxed before the next case, so this case is now closed. And thank God for that. I think I have a lot. Sorry, being in the dark right now. That was a mouthful. That was Alone in the Dark too. Well, thank you all very much for watching. Fortunately, Tiffany didn't get too involved in this project, but maybe if I updated this project one day, I will definitely do that. She's getting involved in it right now, actually. Getting in my head. She a sorceress too? She putting black magic spell on me? Are you, baby? Huh? Yeah, I'm aware that there's a third game in the series too, and I'm gonna get to work on that immediately. Yep. Early 2026. What else do you want from me?
I have a spell on you, Jason.
I'm coming, baby. I'm coming. Oh, I'm aware Tiffany's got a spell on me. Which, in both our cases, that's not a bad thing. After all, I brought her into this world pretty much, so it's perfectly normal. What do you want from me now, baby? Oh, you want to celebrate? Well, why didn't you say so? Oh, why don't you just recreate another vision of the Flying Dutchman and we'll dance and party on the ship then. Day or night. That was fun, baby. That was fun indeed. Woo. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching and listening. I'm sorry it took over an hour. I tried to get it done, but it's a long-ass game, and it's been a complex game itself, so... Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. This is Dixon of the Ultimate Game. I'm logging off. And Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.